Welcome to Meet the Author, a show where we explore the world through the imagination of talented writers. On this show, we will talk with authors from Laurel, Prince George's County, the DMV, and beyond. Welcome to Meet the Author. Most people have used or at least heard of rideshare service, where drivers and passengers that need transportation are connected to one another, and it's normally done through an app. Well, today we have Bob Reilly with us. He's a rideshare driver, a musician, and a writer who has taken his love for all of these things and has created his very own brand. Now, part of that brand is his book, Rideshare with Robert, which is a collection of essays where he has chronicled stories and pictures of his many rideshare adventures. So let's do as he tells us in his book. Let's climb in, buckle up, and get ready for a wild and wonderful ride. And let's meet our guest author today, Mr. Bob Reilly. Hi, Bob. How are you?
Christine, I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So we're just going to talk a little bit about you and about your book and all the wonderful things that you have going on.
Sure.
So like I said, we'll talk about you. So tell us who you are, like as a family man, the different work and things that you do around the area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought the family man into the picture because on March 30th, I celebrate 38 years of marriage with my wife, Pam.
Congrats.
And so, yes, I'm a family man. But my own family history comes into that, like most marriages. You have that history, and some of that. There's a lot about family and the roots of family, and all these other things that play a part of who we are in the book. There's a lot of that in the book. So, as you read these stories, you'll get a pretty good sense of what that's about. I have 3 children: Liana, Christopher, and Alex. And we went on my wife and I went on an adoption journey back in the 90s and decided to adopt children internationally. Now, we went to China in 94 for our oldest, who just got married last October. And I wrote a song for her wedding, 2 songs. The second was in Korea, and we went to Korea in 97. And if you've ever heard of the expression surprise pregnancies, you ever heard of a surprise pregnancy? Well, in our case, it was a surprise adoption.
Okay.
We volunteered to be part of a summer program to host young kids from the Philippines. In this Catholic Charities had a new program in the Philippines, and we volunteered, or we became volunteered, so to speak. And we offered to do it several times. And the second time, we did not want to adopt. We had made our decision not to adopt. And God had another plan for our life.
Of course.
So we fell in love with the second young guy and went down to the journey of adoption. And I went to Makati in the Philippines and brought him home. He's 25 now, graduate from UMBC and doing pretty well.
Great. And that's why I brought that up, because you mentioned in your book, and I thought that was a very interesting story and wanted you to be able to share that. Because that also in your story, like I hear you and see a part of you. So I wanted to be able to share that with the viewers today.
Thank you.
So also in your book, you talked about working, the different things that you do. So you're a writer, a songwriter, like you mentioned, writing a song for your daughter, of course, an author, and you write for the Laurel Independent.
That's correct.
So then you're a performer. You write songs and you perform, and then you mentioned a podcast series. So is that coming along, or has that started yet?
The podcast, like the book, is a process. And I've been doing a lot of research, talking to a lot of people, just as I planned, and got mentored in the process of book writing, finding a publisher, and then this part of the journey, which is the marketing, getting the word out, and is very innate to me. I'm comfortable with it. That is my sweet spot. That's part of my history in 35 years of global supply chain logistics. So when I was on that course in my life, through my career, and then launching several consulting companies along the way, I learned a lot of skills, learned a lot of things, and marketing and branding were 2 of those things that I just really fell in love with. And now that's what I'm doing in this world.
Right. So like I mentioned, it's a way of things coming around full circle, right?
Coming around. And on all the seeds that were planted along the way by people, by others, by family, by school, by other mentors, by people and situations in our life that bring us to a place that sometimes looks like, in the case of the rideshare world, you moving from senior executive to shuttling people around to daycare centers and picking up groceries and loading them in my trunk.
Right.
Felt like 10 steps back
Right.
on the front end. And I struggled with that because of some identity things that I had to sort out and get my identity straight. And once I got my identity straight again, I was back on track. The floodgates of creativity opened up.
Beautiful. I love it. Love to see it. And in that, with your marketing and all the things that you do surrounding your book and your brand. So like I mentioned, you're very active on social media. I saw that you had website, you have Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Like, how do you do all of that stuff? I find it hard just to maintain one social media site, but do you have help with that, or how does that work for you?
Once again, it's a world that I'm comfortable with.
Okay.
I'm a bit of an anomaly at my age. I'm an oddball, but that's okay. I've lived with that my whole life.
The identity thing, you're learning who you are.
Yeah, but I love doing it, and part of this journey, when you explore my website and other things I'm doing, the creative consultant. So I moved from consulting, which covered my industry and supply chain, to creative consultant, because if I can help other people on that journey, wherever they're at. Right. And it might just be an hour of conversation sitting down and saying, what are your aspirations? And are you willing to perspire in your aspirations? What do you want? What are the things that you're looking at? What are the things you're thinking about? I've managed to do that free of charge on many of my rides, giving mentoring advice and just blessing people that way.
That's nice. Yeah. Okay, so we mentioned the transition. So you went from the executive level consultant, like you said, trying to find yourself. So talk to us a little bit how you felt during that time and that transition for you.
Well, the starting the journey in my early 60s, I found myself on the other side of the fence in my industry, and do a lot of cuts, and especially in the government sector. You might recall back a while back when there was a lot of phasing down during the sequestration period, with the government business, and people like Lockheed and Northrop and others were just shedding people right and left, and I got caught up in that, and so at the time, my attitude was typical me, which was, so what? I'll get a job, and I went at it that way. And I exhausted all the obvious troughs, people that I know, all my connections, hundreds of people, second, third interviews. In some cases, I would get that call after the third interview. I was high-fiving myself on several third interviews, knowing I got this one. I got this one. And so I didn't get that one, but I get that pleasant little email or message saying, we decided to go in another direction.
I understand.
You ever had that? Well, I'm sure some of you have. So I just said, well, and then I found out in several cases that the people that were hired were younger people that I had mentored along the way. So I felt that awkward place, and I don't care, what it is. Many people might feel that way in their personal lives when there are things going on in their life. Maybe a person can't get pregnant, for example, but all their friends are getting pregnant. And something in you calls you to celebrate and put on a happy face, but you're dying inside, because you don't have that. Well, that's how I felt. Right. That's how I felt. And so I said, I'm so happy they got the job. I'm so delighted that I was part of that journey.
Right.
But it was my job.
Right.
That kind of thing. So we had a guy, actually he's from Nigeria. He was living with us for a year. And he pulled me aside sometimes, I found that in the conversations, I didn't know whether this person, this friend, was commanding me to do something or just suggesting. But when he told me to drive for Uber, it sounded more like a command, and I felt like maybe it was a word from God. Okay. He says, wow, you've got to do Uber. One of these things. I said, okay. Right. And I did it. I did it because he realized something in me that I couldn't see at the time. I was drying up inside. I was stuck behind that computer, working full-time for months, trying to get a full-time job disappointment interview. And I thought I had it in me to just take the no's and the blows as they came,
They keep coming.
and just
Yeah, keep going.
accepting the fact that no's mean not now.
Right, right.
The door will. Well, it just didn't happen. It didn't happen in my time, and it sure didn't happen in my way.
Yeah.
And so when he said that, he showed me how to use the app and everything. I signed on. I was miserable for probably 4 months, biting my lip, kind of, what are you doing? What are you doing? I do not understand this. And yet still trusting
Right.
that there's a purpose in all of this, and it's temporary. It's only temporary. And I started thinking about temporary in terms of months, days, weeks, or the rest of my life.
Right, right.
And so I said, what does this season look like? Because right now I just don't feel it.
Right.
And within about 4 months, something happened, and I talk about it in the book. And it was a profound moment in which the light of revelation really just blasted the inside of that vehicle. And that big, big light bulb went off, and I realized the purpose,
Right.
In exactly where I was meant to be.
It makes a world of a difference, right?
Right.
The same situation, but you look at it totally different. And yeah. So that's what we see. Like I said, I can see and hear you in your writing. So like you mentioned a lot about your faith. I just like that you're not afraid to be yourself in your book and to express your faith. So was that a challenge for you? You sound pretty comfortable doing it now, but I was just wondering, was it a challenge for you to write like that and express yourself like that?
I think in many ways, other than things that, you find yourself in through no fault of your own, you just find that the earth is shaking
Right.
and the bottom is falling out, and you just got to deal with whatever those circumstances are. Making that choice, entering into the furnace, I knew what I was going into wasn't going to be easy, because it involved 3:30, 4 a.m. mornings, which I haven't recovered from. I'm still up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. But I'm finding things to do.
Right.
But it's not writing a book; it's doing other things. Now I'm writing and doing columns and that kind of thing. But I didn't realize that the sacrifice would also be cathartic. I didn't realize what therapeutic benefit would come from pouring out, because I had journaled 4 binders of stories. I got many, many more stories.
Right.
That you call me a decision for so many to make it into the book, but I think I got a pretty good variety of stories and observations and experiences to share. But I had so many there that I had to kind of sort through them. And as I began to put more and more flesh on the bones of those stories, and even as the process went along, I just started taking bullet point notes and a few different things, because you just don't have a lot of time.
Right. So that's
between
I was
rides.
going to go there.
But it's amazing what a quiet moment can bring out once you start to reflect on that time and that drive. It's like any other conversation,
Right.
But you bring those important things, the little headers, the little things, and they come back to you. But the therapeutic benefit, I thought that I was getting an abundance of that transformational process, the whole human part of it, in terms of my connection with humanity, trying to understand myself in that process, as I'm getting older and understanding things. In retrospect, I've got history, but more important than history, I've got now.
Right.
And I've got other people's histories and other people's stories that were flooding into my life. And I'm saying, wow, this is rich, And so I was learning that. But then I would say, God, put me back in that place. Now it's time for 3 a.m., 4 a.m., 5 a.m., early morning times to process all this, meditate on what you're writing, and learn from this part of the process. And so it was profound. I didn't expect it. So that was a curveball.
So it sounds like, the book, like you kind of write for people and to sell books, but it's like this process was kind of for you. Like you said, therapeutic and cathartic. It sounds like it's helping you, continues to help you.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Because I know that I was called to do it.
Right.
I know I was called to do it.
It makes a difference when you're called, right?
Yes. all
It
the
makes a
difference in the
big
world.
difference. Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Okay, and then you
Yeah.
mentioned taking your bullet points. That was one question I had too. So
Yeah.
how do you remember all the stories? Do you take notes after each ride, or do you take notes later after the day? How did that process work for you?
In the beginning, and for several years, I journaled, like I said, these binders, and I would binder these stories, I bind them, boom, boom, writing down the stuff, and
Right.
at the end of the day, I write them down. At the end of the ride, I have a quiet hour. I'd have a
Okay.
lunchtime when things get slow, write them down, write them down.
Okay.
I captured a lot. I captured 3 books worth of stories.
Wow.
But after a while, what happened was I would even on these cards or binders, I have maybe 3 or 4 times the information as far as stories in one binder
Mm-hmm.
that I had in the beginning, where I was just going crazy, 3 or 4 pages of notes on the ride, down to the very detail.
I was going to say, were you specific? I can see you doing that.
I got very specific, but then when I actually got to the part of the book,
Yeah.
I said, I have to make a decision here,
Mhm.
you know? And then I started to explore other people that were writing books about rideshare, you know,
Okay.
the kind of, and most of the stuff was the sensational element of it, like, you know, rideshare seductions, or, you know,
Right.
how I lost, but whatever it was, you know, they were having this kind of sensationalistic type of thing, and I wanted mine to be different. I wanted
Okay.
mine to be more, some sensational, some kind of wild stuff, because that was always the question: what was your wildest ride? You know,
Mm-hmm.
and so, you know, I'm not going to fulfill all those appetites, you know, and I'm sure not at the end of that spectrum any more than I'm at the end of this spectrum. And so I had to settle with most
Okay.
people, broad based, might enjoy this. I did the same thing with the music when I go out and
Okay.
play, you know, to try to accommodate and bring that gift to a broad,
Okay.
a more broad group.
So that's right, how you were able to take the 70 or so, the notebooks that you have, and
Yeah.
narrow them down to the 34. And like you said, there are a wide variety of different stories and essays, you like to call them, that you have in
Essays,
here.
right? Yeah.
So yeah, we want to talk about a couple of them
Okay.
because they stood out to me, and just wanted to talk about
Okay.
them a little bit.
Sure.
So the first one we want to talk about is the human GPS. So you were nice when you called him the human GPS. Look, I looked at it and said, they're know-it-all. I just called him a know-it-all. So I thought that was interesting. How do you
Yeah.
deal with the human GPS riders that you have in your vehicle?
Well, you know, after once a lot of these things happen, you know, 4 months might seem like a long time, but in perspective, 4 months on the front end of the journey, you know, was nothing compared to the back end of the journey.
Mhm.
You know, it's kind of like life, an
Right,
eternity,
right.
you know, for 4 months. So these 7 years, you know, everything else, a lot of that came after the processing and the acceptance. And then I said, somebody asked me a similar question the other night at the book signing over down the street here at Ragamuffins. And one of the questions in the Q&A was, you talked about some of these very difficult rides that you had. And then you even talked about weapons in the car and things like this. Did you ever feel threatened? I mean,
Right.
what was your worst ride, and why did you ever ask people to get out of the car? And the answer to your question as well is no. I just learned to accept whatever was placed in that vehicle at that time and trust that it was there for a purpose.
Wow. Okay.
And it meant taking a lot of hits. And I joyfully took hits. It meant taking a lot of abuse.
Wow.
And I took the abuse. You know why?
It's part of your purpose.
Stories.
And stories. Okay.
Stories. Stories. I'm thinking in the back of my mind, this is
There's something
crazy,
to tell.
but it's a story. So
And
that
then
was that was part of the redemption.
right.
Was the fact that these are stories, and for every story, there's a backstory,
Mhm.
and that's how people are. You know, people reveal their story, oftentimes in some strange ways.
Right. Right.
But there's a backstory,
Right.
and I'm always interested in the backstory. You know, but that's a journalistic thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it seems like too, you get a lesson like that at the end of it, because you could be hard, like to fight him and tell him I know my way or let me do my way. Just deal with it. Like you put the lesson in there. Like sometimes it's just easier to just let them say what they have to say and
Let
keep
it go,
moving.
and because my attitude is this, you know, I look at averages. The average ride is around 15 minutes. If I can't put up with this nonsense for 15 minutes,
Right.
I should have never become a parent.
Right.
I should have never gotten married.
I hear you.
I shouldn't even leave my house.
Right.
You know?
Right.
So if I can't put up with this for 15 minutes, I'm in the wrong business.
Right. Okay. So a couple others, like I said,
Yeah.
just try to show the variety that you
Yeah.
have in the book. So when I first saw it, like I said, a couple of the titles stood out. So I See Your Faith. They were Waiting for Jesus and For the Love of God.
Mhm.
But then when I read the Waiting for Jesus, I went, oh, Waiting for Jesus. So
Hey,
and that
Jesus.
was a
That's
good
correct.
one. It was lighthearted, friendly. It just showed the different cultures and how you're able to, interact, friendly, warm, lighthearted interactions with different people.
Yeah.
So I like that one.
Mhm.
And then, like I said, another one, it's called I'm Sorry. So I
Yes.
felt like you explained the situation and what happened during the ride, but all you could do was say, I'm sorry. And you left it at that. Like sometimes that's all you could do.
That's all you can do. I mean, you're not God. I'm not
Right.
God, you know. But sometimes all you can do is empathize with that person, and just, I'm sorry you're going through this. I mean,
Yes.
there's only so much you can do in the context of picking a person up and dropping them off, 20 minutes later.
Right.
You're not going to heal every wound,
And it's
but
amazing.
maybe
I'd
you
like
can
to
lighten
see.
the load a little.
Right. So it's like I like to see their end of it because it might make a world
Yeah.
of a difference.
Yeah, you don't
And
know. Just an encouraging word.
Mhm. So yeah, really appreciated that.
Yeah.
And then, like you mentioned, a fishy ride called LaWanda stood out to me because first thing, the title, I was thinking a fish called Wanda.
That's
So then I said, so how do you come up with these titles? Do you do catchy little things like that, things that
Yeah.
stand out to you? How do you come up with your titles?
Well, it's interesting. And number one, thank you for recognizing that draw in,
Mhm.
with that similarity. It was actually purposely done because of that.
Okay.
And sometimes you make these decisions along the way when you're writing. And one of them was, is a fish called Wanda a little bit too isolated,
Right.
for your everyday people? What fish called? So a fishy ride called Wanda stands alone
Mhm.
in its cleverness, just as just a header,
Right.
I thought. So I said, I just have to leave the other part alone. People that get it, get it.
Right.
People that
Right.
don't. And it doesn't really matter because the header is just an interesting header.
Mhm.
And I had a chuckle at it.
Right. Right.
And if I could enjoy a header,
And I did too. So your
and you
readers
did too.
enjoyed it too.
So that's where that came from. And that was a fishy ride.
Yeah.
And technically, as you know the story, and I'm not going to get into the weeds of the story.
Right.
You've got to buy the book and read it. Okay. But here's the deal. The ride, even though I included it technically, the whole story
Right.
was
It
not
wasn't.
even a
It
ride.
wasn't.
It was a ride
Right.
that never was meant to be.
That's funny.
And then, but the last couple sentences actually were the ride that was meant to be.
Right.
But the story itself was a ride that wasn't a ride.
Right. And that went back to my question. You
Yeah.
said your others, like those rides where you're concerned for your life. But again, she didn't seem like she was going to hurt you or anything like that.
Yeah.
But just having to deal with that stuff. But you already mentioned,
No,
just
it's okay.
get it
No,
over
like I
with.
said, I've been married 38 years.
Mhm.
No, it was a wild experience, but it was not uncommon.
Okay.
Not uncommon in the work that I do and in the nonprofit world.
So patience is a word that I'm getting from you too. You're patient and calm in your dealings with your family and with your rideshare customers. I sense that.
It is that way. You
Right.
have to be.
Right.
Because once again, I don't know the backstory.
Okay. And so those were
Yeah.
the ones I wanted to talk about. Was there any one story or something that you wanted to share from your book?
No, and I'll tell you why.
Because you want them to buy the book. So.
Well, I want to know the book because there's a lot in there, but it's kind of like it's almost like a little bit of a protective piece of what I am, because the only way that I can draw an analogy is that I went through a gestation period
Mhm.
with this book, and I had my baby, after that 10 months.
Right.
But all those other stories in there are little babies,
Right.
that came to life, and they were birthed through this process. So to isolate one and to say, what's your favorite? It's like saying,
Right.
Liana, Chris, Alex, pick one. I
Right.
can't do it.
Fair enough.
Mhm.
So give people a chance to, like you said, look at all of them
Yeah.
and see if they maybe have a favorite or some few that
There
stood
you
out
go.
to them like they
And
stood out to me.
Well, the other night after reading the 5 that stood out to you, the person that one of the people that was asking the questions, at the thing, had a copy of the book and said, "Can I talk to you for a second?" I said, "Sure." So he pulled me aside and said, "Bob, I got to tell you, there's a lot of interesting writing in here. A lot of stuff just made me crack up." He said, "But because of what I'm going through, medically,
Mm.
your story, dialysis, hit me and really hit home.
Right.
You know, I don't know where people are. I don't know
Right.
the backstory. I don't know the journey that these people are on. You know, it's common to all: life, death,
Mm-hmm.
and everything in between.
Everything in between.
But what I do know is that somebody is going to get something, and some will have their personal favorites, like you said. Yeah.
Well, that's a good way to sum it all up.
Yeah.
Now, we mentioned that you have books and books filled of more stories. So,
Mhm.
is there another book coming to add to your brand that you have, the Rideshare with Robert brand?
I don't know. But I did put a little tease in the book, and I gave about 74 headers that didn't make it into the book. So I don't know what's in the future. What I do know is that I'm going to go about letting people know about the book and sharing the book. I know 2023 is my purpose for what I'm doing here, maybe even 2024.
Right.
As far as going through that therapeutic session again for 10 months, I don't know if I'm ready to jump right
Right.
back into that right now.
Okay.
Mm.
But another thing I thought about is you said like purpose. I said you were patient, but I see that you're a man that kind of waits for your purpose and you get led and directed to where you're supposed to go. So you do that and let us know if there's another book coming or whatever plans that you have.
Okay.
And speaking of that, you mentioned the Ragamuffins event that you recently did, and you
Yes.
have other events that you've politely shared with me.
Yes.
So what we're going to do now is just show some clips or some footage of your event at Ragamuffins.
Oh,
Okay?
thank you.
All
Okay.
right.
Rideshare topic, do something in terms of your music career. You've been on the DC music scene since late 60s.
Like 1,000 voices, voices. Alright. Like 1,000 voices, voices.
So that was some footage from you at Ragamuffins. So that was the hard part, Bob. We finished with the interview. You can breathe a sigh of relief now. But I did warn you that we do have an activity. I like to kind of do an informal activity or game with the authors as they come on the show.
Okay.
So the one I picked for you is I'm just going to say a couple words from your book or things that I've heard about you. And I'm just going to say the word and then you reply back to me the first word or phrase that comes to your mind.
Okay.
And like I said, it can be a phrase. You don't have to be limited to just one word, not a paragraph, but just a little phrase.
Okay.
So the first thing, of course, the first word is laurel. What comes to mind when I say laurel?
Almost 40 years.
Okay. About family.
The most important thing in life, other than my relationship with God.
Right. And of course, rideshare.
An amazing journey.
Okay. Now about music, how does that make you feel? Or what do you think of when I say music?
Well, I love music. Music is a very important part of my life. And that's why I write, and I write music, and I perform music. And it is a calling. And therefore, I want to share my gift to the world, both inside and outside church, because church to me is people.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Okay. And so it's funny how you went to church. So my next word is faith.
Yes. Faith. I wouldn't be here today with you without faith.
Okay. And then the last word, because this again stood out to me in your book and in all of your writings, humanity. What does that
Yes.
mean to you?
It means that we all have a purpose, we all have a journey, and that we recognize that we're all on the same journey. That's where the healing begins, because we get over ourselves.
Mm-hmm. All right. So thank you so much, Bob. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and learning about your rideshare stories. So if you don't mind, you can share with the viewers how they can get your book, how they can get in touch with you, and find out all the different things that you have going on throughout the community.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you. what I'd like to let you know is that you can reach me, and the easiest way to get information about the book, about the music, about the band, and about my business is by going to ridesharebyrobert.com. www.ridesharebyrobert.com. It's all there, including upcoming events. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And we will definitely talk again soon.
Okay. Thank you,
All
Christine.
right. Rideshare by Robert is a collection of journalistic short story essays that capture the experiences Bob has had as a rideshare driver. They're quick reads that don't need to be read in any particular order, but they do allow you to experience the rideshare world and, in fact, humanity through Bob's eyes. They are funny, they are serious, and they are real. So when you get a chance, be sure to check out some of the rideshare adventures that Bob so graciously records and eloquently shares with all of us. I would like to thank Bob for joining me today and sharing his rideshare stories. So of course, we look forward to hearing more of those. And since he's very active in many ways all around the city and the surrounding areas, we also hope to see him and hear him playing in upcoming city events. If you are an author and would like to be featured on our program, you can send an email to cmjohnson@laurel.md.us or call 301-725-5300, extension 2110. We would love to have you on the show. I'm Christine Johnson, reminding you to open a book and let it take you on your next adventure. Hello, and welcome to Meet the Author, a show where we explore the world through the imagination of